Hi, everyone. Welcome back. You are in tune with Voces Unidas, a Voces Unidas in Pacoima and Valley Views production. We are calling in from Radio Lean, KROJ 101.5 FM, coming to you live from our studios at Pueblo y Salud in the city of San Fernando. And before we really get started with our segment today and introducing our ghost, our guest, excuse me.
It's spooky season. It's a ghost.
I know. I have a lot of things I'm planning in my mind, so apologize for that. But we want to do a land acknowledgement as today is People's Indigenous Day. And this is derived directly from the Tatavian Band of Mission Indians website to properly acknowledge their tribe. Today we recognize and honor the original occupants and stewards of the land on which we now gather. Many of us joined this gathering from lands that are the traditional home territory of the Fernandino Tatavian Band of Mission Indians. Our collective recognizes and thanks the first people of this ancestral and unceded territory of the Fernandino Tatavian Band of Mission Indians, which is now occupied by the city of LA and residents like ourselves. It is important to honor their elders, past and present, and descendants who are citizens of the Fernandino Tatavian Band of Mission Indians. We recognize that the tribe is still here, and we are committed to uplifting their stories, their culture, and their community. And again, we're here in San Fernando. They do take acknowledge rent as well. So if you feel inclined, check out their website to learn more about the tribe and how to support them and their continued efforts on their homelands. But yes.
Thank you so much for that, Teodora. Yeah, guys, thank you guys for tuning in. Again, this is Voces Unidas with your hosts, Diosy,
Melisa,
and Teodora.
And Teodora, please introduce our guest today.
Yes, today we have a great organizer in the San Fernando Valley, Taina Vargas, who founded Initiate Justice in September 2016 and Initiate Justice Action in 2021 with the goal of activating the political power of people directly impacted by mass incarceration. Since its inception, Initiate Justice has successfully co-sponsored multiple pieces of legislation aimed at ending mass incarceration and recruited over more than 45,000 currently incarcerated people that have helped lead these efforts. But of course, before she started with Initiate Justice Action, she worked in organizing, policy advocacy, as a statewide advocacy coordinator with East Justice Group, has been a state campaigner with the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, and has experience as a field representative for the California State Assembly. We are really excited to have you here with us today and learn more about the work that you're doing in community that is uplifting the biggest needs. Of course, today our segment is focused on what's on your ballot. Mm-hmm. Earlier in our season, in our day, we were talking about Measure G, who that is another measure that's going to impact folks. We heard a bit about that, but we really want to dedicate this episode to Proposition 36. For some background, Melisa and I attended a Cal Matters event in the San Fernando Bodevi restaurant, and it was really just an opportunity for us to learn, and really wanted to put more energy into learning about Prop 36, and we know that Initiate Justice Action is a great advocate. So I want to go over to let our guests introduce also if anything else that they want to add about themselves.
No, I just want to say thank you all so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk a bit more about this election and why I do the work that I do.
Yeah, before we get to talking about the election, I wanted to just get to know you a little bit better. So my question to you, I guess, is what is the spark behind your advocacy and the drive, right? Because this is very impressive, right? And this is not the first time that we've had you in our studio. You've been here before, and always with, you came with other folks, but always with advocacy in the forefront. So what was that for you?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, I'm born and raised here in the San Fernando Valley. I was born in Silmar.
Oh,
I actually spent a significant amount of my childhood in places like San Fernando, Pacoima, Panorama City, Van Nuys, so very much an East Valley girl growing up in the 90s. And and I think, those of us who remember growing up in the 90s in the Valley, it was very heavily policed and under-resourced here.
Yeah.
Something that we still see today, but I feel like was even more stark in the 90s, still going through the war on drugs. And my parents were both addicted to drugs at the time. They were part of the crack cocaine epidemic. So that was something that was very much a struggle to experience as a child.
Yeah.
And, when I was a kid, I just kind of like resented my parents for the decisions that they made. But as I got older, I understood that all of this happens, as part of a system,
Yeah.
right? I'm Afro-Latina. My parents are from the East Coast, but my grandparents are all from Puerto Rico, from the island. So, all of this, shout out Indigenous Peoples Day, right? Like all of this is a result of colonialism and forced migration. My grandparents were forced to migrate to the East Coast to work in factories, and then my parents came here. And it's just like cycles and cycles of trauma. And I realized that what my parents actually needed was care. They needed access to treatment and to rehabilitation, but the only time they ever got access to any of those things was when they got arrested first. They had to, break the law in order to get access to care. So that was really a big driver for me in the work that I do. I wanted to ensure that people like my parents would, get the care that they needed in the community. And, they were also impacted by incarceration. My mom, my sister, my brother would get arrested from time to time. My dad did over a year in county jail. And I think that was a really big, turning point for me, like not having my dad around when I was a teenager. So I really wanted to like commit my time, my energy, and my advocacy towards ensuring that like less children would have to go through, what I went through growing up.
And what were those like initial first steps for you, like to do that?
My mom always used to joke and say like, oh, you should be a lawyer. Like you have an opinion about everything. You're always, you're always arguing and stuff like that. Yeah. So when I went to college, I went to CSUN. And I did Model United Nations there. So I was like very involved in like diplomacy and going to conferences and things like that. So at that time, I saw myself being involved maybe in like international human rights advocacy. But then while I was in graduate school, actually, I was dating somebody who got arrested and was facing a multiple life sentence. Wow. So at that time, I had to make a really serious decision, and I actually decided to marry somebody in jail. And he got sentenced to 10 years in prison because of laws that we were able to change. Thanks to a lot of the advocacy that we were doing, he ended up coming home after 7 years instead of 10. Wow. But still, I spent 7 years of my life, Monday through Friday, I was doing things like working for the state legislature, working for a nonprofit, doing policy advocacy. And then Saturday and Sunday, I was in the prison visiting room, and I was looking at, other visitors and incarcerated people who were coming to me and being like, hey, what laws are changing, And I realized, okay, not every person has a person in their not every visiting room has a person who's just like connected to this advocacy world. So I said, okay, I want to like build a bridge so that people who are actually affected by these laws can get accurate information about, what's happening that could change their life. And, so that they can take action too. There's a lot of things that, currently incarcerated people can do in terms of policy advocacy.
Initiate action.
Yeah. So that's why we started Initiate Justice in 2016. And actually one of the first bills we worked on was Prop 57, which passed in 2016, and it did a few things, but one of them was it created a credit earning program for people in prison.
Okay.
So people who completed educational rehabilitative programs could earn time off their sentence. So I think folks don't realize, like, before 2016, almost nobody could earn time off their sentence in prison. That was something we had to fight really hard to change, and that was something that helped my loved one come home sooner, and lots of other folks as well. But we worked on, other laws after that, namely Proposition 17 back in 2020, which restored the right to vote to people on parole. That was a really huge victory for us. And then shortly after that passed, I said, okay, let's make sure that people on parole are actually voting and understand what's on the ballot. So that's why we created Initiate Justice Action, which is our 501c4 arm, and we do like voter guides and things like that.
Oh, okay. That's such a beautiful way to like get a full picture. I know that last time you were here, you were on Valley Views, and we were talking about you guys were hosting a like ballot party or yes. Can you tell us a little bit about those and what the purpose of those are in the community?
Absolutely, and this is great timing because our ballot party in LA is this Saturday.
Great.
In the Valley.
Plug it in.
Yeah, so it's going to be this Saturday at North Hollywood Park from 12 to 3. Everybody is welcome. Please bring your ballots. But what we do at the ballot party is, we want to make voting like fun because something that I always share is like, I have voted in every election since I turned 18 and I just turned 36. And I've been voting for half of my life and every election never fails. I open up my ballot and there's at least one thing on there where I'm like, I don't know what this office is. I don't know who these people are. Like I don't know what to vote for. So the idea of the ballot parties is to vote like in community.
Yeah.
To talk to other people who, might know more about the Board of Supervisors races than you do, or might know more about, a local ballot measure or have a clearer sense of, what Congress member they think is a better person to vote for. So this ballot party, we're partnering with other organizations, the other progressive organizations that put together voter guides. So we'll have folks there like from Knock LA, which has a really comprehensive voter guide, KROJ California, which has a statewide voter guide, other justice reform orgs like La Defensa and Sister Warriors Freedom Coalition, and also ACT LA, who's been doing a lot of work on Local Measure A around affordable housing. So we'll have some community partners there who'll be there with their voter guides. Wow. We'll have food, a bounce house for the kids. Great. So yeah, again, it'll be this
Y'all
Saturday.
Thought about everything.
We want to make it fun for folks. So yeah, it'll be this Saturday, October 19th at North Hollywood Park from 12 to 3. Everybody's welcome.
Well, thank you for that. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think it's, so my first time I voted was for the election of between, in 2022, that was between Trump and Biden, and I think when I filled out my ballot, not that I think, but I know I was so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So to hear that there is those spaces in our community where you can and go and feel comfortable, especially as a family. There isn't a lot of spaces where you can come, bring your kids, and enjoy and also learn about your ballot that, will take you maybe, like, honestly, some folks, they have 2 hours to take to vote because it's such an extensive process in so many pages to go through. So to do it in community, it's really admirable. And we thank you for that too.
No, and we really wanted to make it kid friendly this time too, because a lot of studies show that when kids seeing their parents vote, then they're much more likely to vote when they grow up too. So yeah, we definitely want to create space for young people to be there and, to see their parents voting.
Yeah, actually recently Valley Views on our social medias, there was posted a Arleta High School informational segment, especially from Univision, where students were coming together, and their high school students who are about to get the privilege to, because voting is a privilege, to vote and like register to vote. So I think there's a lot of movement building that's happening here in the San Fernando Valley that is putting us at a place to normalize voting in our
and through that I also learned that through that post that you're talking about on Instagram, I learned that 16-year-olds can register to can register pre-register to vote. I didn't know that. That's amazing. Yep. I didn't register to vote until I turned 18. So that's really cool that the youth can take action from beforehand and be more intentional, I guess. Absolutely. About that. And we can see also, we have our interns, Valley Views has interns here as well, and they are very much in tune with everything that's going on. They are very informed, and so I think it's such a shift, from like when we were growing up. Yes. That we weren't as informed, and it was actually like, I think amongst my friends, it was like, we don't watch the news and we don't really care about that. And I think the younger generation now, I still think that they don't watch the news, but I think they have access to so much information. It's like inevitable for them. But yeah, like, do you guys want to talk a little bit about that too?
Yeah. No, yeah. And I think Initiate Justice Action, from the research I was doing, really does set up, not even just like an adult, but if I were to look up a ballot measure or anything like that, I I would trust Initiate Justice Action, because they also, I was doing my research, and I know that they also have their scorecards to make sure that you know about those representatives out there that have a good score. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about how you guys navigate testing the scores.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually just released 2 tools that I definitely encourage folks to check out on our website or on our Instagram, ijaction.org or at ijaction on Instagram. But one is our scorecard, which you just mentioned. So every year we grade all of the state legislators on their voting record on justice reform bills. To our knowledge, it's the only scorecard that focuses just on that, because you have other orgs, like Planned Parenthood, who will grade on reproductive justice, or Enviro voters, who will grade on the environment, which are important things. But we need a scorecard to say, okay, who is voting on criminal justice reform? So we look at usually 7 to 8 different bills, and, if they vote on all of them, then they get an A+. If they're missing one, they get an A, and, so on and so forth. If you've only voted in support of 2 of our bills or less, then you get a fail. And something that we did last year, and we'll do it again this year when things slow down a little bit, is we also had like a letter writing party to the legislators, where we actually sent them a copy of the scorecard, and depending on what their grade was, we sent them a note to go along with it.
Wow.
So like if you got an A, it was like, thanks so much for being a champion, or if it's like you got a C, it was like, hey, you could do a little better next time.
They got a report card.
Basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so important to make sure folks are able to know the history of their record. And,
Right.
And I think a lot of the times that's kind of where sometimes we forget the previous elections and previous state sessions when there are voting, and you guys have like that historical archive on your records.
And the legislators do pay attention to it. We had a couple call us up like, hey, why'd I get a C? I think I deserve a B. Or, other folks thank us for giving them an A, which is really nice. But then the other tool, which is probably much more comprehensive and took a lot more time, is our voter guide, which we just released. So our voter guide, covers the different things, mostly statewide. We're a statewide org, so we focus on the state offices. But we did endorse some candidates from local races as well. So we endorsed some candidates at the LA City and the LA County level, some folks from Sacramento, Oceanside, but also, state candidates running for Senate and Assembly. But aside from our endorsed candidates, we took positions on all 10 of the statewide ballot measures. We took a position on LA County Measure A. And then we also did extensive background research on all candidates running for Senate and Assembly this year. So we looked at whether or not they accept campaign contributions from law enforcement. If they do, we disclosed which agencies they took money from. We look at their background information, their voting records. So if they're in office, their scorecard grade is there. Any statements that they make on public safety, and essentially any campaign promises that they make. And then we make a recommendation in each race, like, vote for this person, don't vote for this person. Some races we even have no recommendation, where we're like, we don't think either one are great,
Yeah, because sometimes you just get to that point where you don't know. And resources like Initiate Justice Action, for folks listening, is always going to be a resource for you. Is there a website that people can look at?
Yeah, the voter guide is on our website, ijaction.org. It pops up as soon as you get to our website.
That is the easiest website to remember, y'all. ijaction.org. We are going to go into a station ID and music break in a moment.
In just a second, we're going to have station ID in about 5 minutes. But
I actually wanted to ask about the strategies that have been most effective, not only for kind of getting out people to vote, coming to the voting parties, things like that, but also we were talking about the history of the different that you guys have worked on and the different measures, and really wanted to kind of dive into some of the most effective community building and strategies that you guys have worked on.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that question. I really appreciate that question, because, we have had to brainstorm okay, what can we do to get people to vote? Because I'm sure, with anybody, it's really hard. We have a really low voter turnout in our country, in our state, because people do feel so overwhelmed. And the more marginalized communities are, it's even more difficult to get out and vote. So we have had to be creative. But I think the most important thing is to just help people see how voting does impact them. Because a lot of times folks will say, well, I don't vote because that doesn't affect me. And then, we have to like really break it down for folks, specifically for folks who are impacted by incarceration. So what we do is we do civic engagement workshops at like parole homes, like, places where people on parole are living. Other like reentry service providers, and we come to them, we meet folks where they're at, and we do civic engagement workshops. And our check-in question starts with like, can you think of a law or an elected official who has had a positive or negative impact on your life? And people will talk about things like the 3 strikes law or gun enhancements, gang enhancements, or they were suitable for parole and the governor overturned their parole suitability, so they can identify how laws have affected them.
Right.
So then we just break down like, okay, well, this law didn't magically just fall down from the sky, right? Like a senator introduced this law and other legislators had to vote to approve it. And then the governor had to sign it. And then we vote for these people. Or some folks, maybe have been able to come home from prison early thanks to a ballot proposition. And we say, okay, people had to vote on that. And now you're home and you have the ability to vote. And now, it's your responsibility to vote too. So I think just like physically like meeting people where they're at.
Totally.
And then like breaking it down, to help folks understand like how it does affect them. But then taking it the step further, which is giving them the resources. So things like the voter guides and the scorecards, the ballot parties, because it's one thing to like have the information and then another thing to say, okay, like how can you actually help me, complete this process and get this ballot turned in?
Yeah. And I mean, I also wanted to like dive deeper into like the different props that you guys have like co-authored and things like that, because that's not an easy task. Like I know that we kind of just came off of a really great win in the state assembly. I don't know, Theo, if you wanted to like quickly chime in.
It was with the state assembly had actually been a supporter of the state Senate bill called SB 1193, and this is a bill that we've all been working on since for a while now. It started with our organizing aspects with the Shutdown Wyman Airport campaign that led into more of a coalition that started uplifting the need of banning leaded aviation fuel. And having Senator Menjivar go ahead and introduce a bill that would ban it statewide. It went through a lot of changes, but of course, this bill still is a pedestal and putting a hard stop on the sale by January 1st, 2031. So it took us a lot of research. It took the backbone of folks before we were even alive talking about airplanes being an issue in their community.
Yeah.
So it's really much rooted in the history, and it wasn't an easy process at all.
No,
So
it was not.
It was just crazy, and like we're still coming kind of off of that win, and so really wanting to like hear about your experience with it with the state assembly, and before that we will do our station ID.
Yes, everyone. So this is Radio Olin, KROJ 101.5 FM. You are tuned in with Voces Unidas, and we are coming to you live from the studios at Pueblo y Salud in the city of San Fernando. This show is produced by Valley Views SFE Media and Voces Unidas in Pacoima. And your hosts for this show are Diosy,
Melisa,
And Teodora.
and we're going to be right back. We're going to take a quick musical break. And in this musical break, you're also going to be hearing from Damiana, who is going to, has a YouTube that we will be linking on our Instagram. But she's going to be talking about Proposition 36, which we're going to be talking about when we come back on. So stay tuned for that. Once again, this is Voces Unidas in Pacoima, and you're tuned into KROJ 101.5 FM. What's up, everyone? You're tuned into Voces Unidas on KROJ 101.5 FM. This show is produced by Valley Views SFE Media and Voces Unidas in Pacoima. Your guests are Diosy,
Melisa,
And Teodora.
and our special guest today is Tiana. How are you?
I'm doing well.
I'm so glad that you joined us today. Thank you so much for sharing about yourself, sharing about your journey with Initiate Justice Action. It's been really fun and interesting so far, getting to know you. I'm excited to get into Proposition 36. During our break, we listened to Damiana from Somos Familia Valle. explain a little bit about why she is going to be voting against Proposition 36. I know right before we went on our break, Melisa had asked a question, so I just want to give a little bit of space for Melisa to continue that conversation. But yeah, go ahead, Mel.
Yeah, thank you, Diosy. Yeah, well, we were just talking a bit about like strategy, effectiveness, and community engagement. So the question that we kind of came off of the break was just your thoughts around strategy, engagement, whether it's on the state legislative side or even in the community-based side. Specifically, we can talk about Prop 57 in 2016 as well as Prop 17 in 2020.
Absolutely. And, before we went on the break, you shared a little bit about your victory with, I think it was SB 1193.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And, that's the beautiful thing about these kinds of pieces of legislation, right? It's like a community is impacted by an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, a community takes the time to come up with a solution.
Mm-hmm.
You take it to a legislator who is friendly, who is also, part of the community, and you move it forward. I'm sure you faced many challenges along the way, and you learned a lot of lessons, and it was the same thing with some of these ballot propositions. So I always like to talk about working on Proposition 57 because that was one of the first big pieces of legislation I worked on. It passed in 2016, but this actually started as an idea back in 2013. So when my ex-husband at the time was in prison, he was doing all these programs and things like that, but he wasn't able to get any time off of his sentence for it. And I said, it'd be really good for public safety and things like that if people got an incentive to do these programs, and then we could reduce our prison population at the same time. So I pretty much harassed my local assembly member until, that's actually how I got hired at the assembly because he was like, you're not going to leave me alone
I love it.
with this bill idea. If I hire you.
That's a strategy.
Yes. He lovingly called me a pain in his butt the whole time I was there. But he introduced the bill that would have allowed for credit earning. But come to find out, the governor at the time, Jerry Brown, also thought it was a good bill idea, but thought it would have been better as a ballot proposition because then we could have expanded it more. Oh, wow. So it got pulled from the legislature and got added to Prop 57, which other, folks were already working on. It did a few other really good things as well. But that was how it got added to that. And then fast forward a couple years later, I was, working with one of our board members at the time named Rasan Thomas, who was incarcerated in San Quentin State Prison. He's free now, but he was in prison for over 20 years. And he said, if you care about the political power of people impacted by incarceration, you need to make sure that we have a right to vote. So the idea of expanding voting rights for people impacted by incarceration came from somebody who was inside. So we tried in 2018 to pass something that would have restored voting rights to people on parole and people in prison. It was not successful, but in 2020, we were able to get something on the ballot to restore voting rights for people on parole. And that was Prop 17. And Prop 17 passed by the highest margin out of all the 12 ballot measures that were on the 2020 state ballot. It also got the second highest number yes votes out of any ballot proposition in California state history. Wow. And this was just the power of the people, just folks who were currently incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, folks who were made to feel like we're not empowered, who really made that happen. So I'd like to share those stories to tell folks, like with SB 1193 or anything, if you have a passion, if you see something that is wrong in your community, just do some research, put together a bill idea, reach out to your legislator, and you can get help figuring out if it's a city, county, state, federal issue. You can get pointed in the right direction and you can really make a change in your community.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that we're kind of coming into the segment of what's on our ballot. And we really do want to get into Prop 36. And so kind of coming off of this answer, it's beautiful moment of the work that we've all done around different legislation. It really starts in the community. It really starts with people's voices being heard and then the movement building behind that. And I kind of wanted to how is that juxtaposed to Proposition 36? How is this different from all of the amazing work that you've done with criminal justice reform, and this kind of being thrown in here, and even I mean I don't want to get like it too muddled with the all these add-ins, but I know Prop 6 I believe is also working on the goal is to end involuntary servitude and change it to voluntary work programs, giving a choice and dignity to people in prison. And so we have kind of these like two juxtaposed like props on the ballot, and kind of just like your thoughts and like just anything that's like kind of coming into mind from that.
Yeah, well, I think it's really interesting that you frame Proposition 36 as a juxtaposition to, good criminal justice reform, because that's actually exactly what this ballot measure is. It's a knee-jerk reaction to wins that we have been ensuring over the last 10 years or so. So I'm going to back us up a little bit.
Please.
Take us back to the year 2014. And we had a really impactful measure on the 2014 ballot called Prop 47. And what Prop 47 did at the time was it reduced a certain level of a certain level of felonies down to misdemeanors. And all of the incarceration savings that we got from that went into the community. So it reduced the prison population, it reduced the jail population, and then that money went back into K through 12 schools, into reentry programs and mental health and drug treatment. And it's been a success. In the last 10 years, Prop 47 has saved more than $800 million, so close to $1 billion in state savings that's gone straight into the community. And they have studied it for 10 years, and they have found that it has not increased crime. However, ever since Prop 47 passed, the opponents of it have been trying to pin anything on Prop 47 and criminal justice reform overall. So, the pandemic hits, communities are suffering financially and emotionally, and we see a small spike in property crime. Violent crime is at historic lows, but, we did see a little bit more of, shoplifting and things like that because people are, suffering right now. But instead of us saying like, okay, how can we do to, help people who are going through a tough time, law enforcement and big corporations have said, let's blame this on Prop 47, something that passed 10 years ago. And that's why we have Prop 36 now. So Prop 36 is essentially attempting to repeal Prop 47. Prop 36 would do some harmful things such as make shoplifting a felony, make simple drug possession a felony. It would also create new felonies, such as one called a, quote, treatment mandated felony, which means you'll be forced into an ineffective locked treatment facility if you commit a certain offense. It adds to the 3 strikes law. It is essentially, like a war on drugs 2.0. But the worst part about it is because it's going to increase incarceration in the same way that Prop 47 decreased it, that means we're going to lose that Prop 47 savings. So this measure is pretending to be about, treatment and mental health, but what it's actually doing is defunding existing mental health and treatment programs that we have right now. So Prop 36 is an incredibly, incredibly harmful measure. It's going to result in an estimated 1.5 million more people being incarcerated over the next 10 years. It's estimated to cost in the low hundreds of millions of dollars every single year in state and local incarceration costs. And it's going to do nothing to make us safer. If we really want communities to be safe, we need to invest in these things like mental health treatment, rehabilitation services, or, anti-poverty measures to ensure that people don't have to commit offenses out of necessity or in order to survive. So we're definitely encouraging folks to vote no on Proposition 36. It's funded by big corporations such as Walmart, Target, 7-Eleven just put in a bunch of money, and also law enforcement, the district attorneys, the prison guards association has put in a lot of money because they're just trying to explode the prison population and line their own pockets.
It's interesting because if folks are listening to the news and watching the news, we have seen I have seen an increase in 7-Eleven theft cover stories, and a lot of these stories on the news that give the narrative of like folks who are breaking in and it kind of makes people want to, when they read again the descriptions, vote for this to make sure that there's like some kind of accountability. But the more that we learn right now, we realize that that's not what's safe for our communities. There is a correlation between criminalization and racial disparities.
Right.
And I think often it's worrisome that we are continuing to have this trend where we easily get the media that's not covering the full truth. And when we were at the Cal Matters event, which of course Cal Matters is nonpartisan, they don't endorse any specific issues, but they do provide information and a platform to speak about this. And Melisa and I were having a conversation about why we wouldn't vote for Prop 36. And one of the biggest reasons was because we want to see more investments in those reentry programs and not see. And it's not that we want these programs to be invested in prison systems so that people can recover. And it's something that I think would backtrack us if there is, this public eye in the media that there's just like this false sense of accountability when it would just hurt people even more.
And I'm really glad that you brought up the media coverage, because that's something that's been a big issue that I don't think we've talked enough about. But there is definitely like an exaggerated perception of crime because of, what the media is focusing on right now. Like if you turn on your local news, you would think that as soon as you walk out of the house, you're going to get, attacked by a smash and grab,
But that's the thing, like the misinformation,
right?
And the fear mongering,
exactly.
And all of that is used as a weapon against us.
Exactly. No, absolutely. But I think that I also want to state that there's nothing in Proposition 36 that would actually address the quote unquote smash and grabs or organized retail theft. Organized retail theft is not in the language at all. And I don't know why we act like it's not already illegal to rob a store. It is. It's already illegal. There already is accountability. You can already be charged for felonies if you steal a certain amount or if you destroy property and things like that. So Proposition 36 is actually going to criminalize like much lower level offenses, such as simple shoplifting or drug possession. So there's this narrative specifically coming from law enforcement, like, oh, our hands are tied. There's nothing that we can do. No, you're just not as effective at your job, and you want to, blame it on a law that passed 10 years ago. But actually, it's already illegal to do those things. And if you're having an issue, in addressing the problem, then maybe the answer isn't more police and more incarceration.
Right. And going back to Initiate Justice Action and the advocacy work that y'all are doing. I know you came from a long canvas today. Can you share a bit about what you're hearing at the doors and reactions, if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I shared when I was coming in here that I spent all day today knocking doors in Boyle Heights, actually, for no on Proposition 36. And we were debriefing afterwards. I love talking to voters because I feel like a lot of times folks haven't really received a lot of information, or especially like when we're in, some more like marginalized communities, folks aren't really being outreached to. And that's why we target areas like Boyle Heights, where we went today. And, most folks hadn't even heard of Prop 36. A lot of folks who we talked to were like, I'm not even sure if I'm voting in this election or not. So the conversation was really about like, okay, well, how do you feel about community safety? Do you think that, more investment in mental health is what makes us more safe, or more incarceration is what makes us more safe? And overwhelmingly people were like, no, investments in mental health, investments in housing and, things like that. So it actually wasn't really like a long stretch, reach to get people to say, I don't think that Prop 36 is a good idea. I think we just have to like have these conversations with people.
Yeah, because I think one of the conversations that we were having, like Theo had mentioned when we were at the Cal Matters, and something that had come up was like, and I don't want to like be like, oh, it's like older folks, but the folks who we were talking to were a bit older, and they're like, yeah, we're just like set in our ways, and this is how, we're very like punitive in the way that we kind of see crime and punishment. And so I don't know, maybe sometimes I get really like deterred about being like, oh, try and, whatever you have to say, like say something right now to like change someone's mind. But, it kind of like, you're like, oh, I don't think sometimes it's not worth trying to change someone's mind because they're so like, they're in their set of beliefs and their ways. But, I I would love to, like, if you had come across someone who was like, oh, this is just how I am, instead of, you know, really understanding what is going on, like, within the bill. Because something that, like Theo said, is like, are we just going to continue supplying, you know, our tax money, our funding funneling it into prisons, and into more policing, or are we going to try and fund it into, you know, mental health services, housing, you know, things that will help folks, like, be alleviated out of poverty, instead of continue to just police marginalized communities.
Yeah, I actually approach those conversations in the same way that I've approached them with my dad. So, you know, my dad is a boomer. Like, I think a lot of parents, you know, I grew up getting hit, getting yelled at, and, you know, because that was, you know, the way that they were taught. And this is like accountability, and this is how you discipline a child, right? So then these ideas like manifest themselves to like, okay, when you're an adult, if you do something wrong, the cops come and get you, and then you go to jail, you go to prison, and, you know, that's accountability. But, you know, for folks who are like millennials or even Gen Z who are like raising kids now, you see, okay, we're not hitting kids anymore. It's not something we're doing anymore, but we're finding other ways of getting children to like correct the behavior, mostly by just talking to them and providing them like the resources that they need to like make better decisions. So people like my dad, he's a very different grandpa than he was a dad, because
Totally.
you know, he's seeing there's a different way now. So I kind of just try to like apply that conversation too, and I say, okay, listen, I understand that this is what we were all taught. You do something wrong, you have to go to jail, you have to face punishment. But we have seen like this has been happening for long enough now where we can see that this isn't working. What actually works is giving people the tools that they need to be successful, so that they're not doing like things like this ahead of time. Or if they do make mistakes, like we all do, we're all human, we all make mistakes. We, you know, we slip, we fall. But instead of, you know, getting a harsh punishment, people need resources, they need treatment, they need, you know, programming and things like that. And that's really where we should be focusing.
I think
I
that's,
love how you explained that, by the way. I just wanted to say, I just like, wow.
yeah.
When I see my dad with my niece, I'm like, this is so different than how you were.
Yeah. No, totally. Yeah.
And I think it's really important to also fill the narrative that we, like that conversation at Cal Matters really did end in an agreement that we have our perspectives, and we should be open to hearing each other's perspectives and have a dialogue that allows us to, you know, open up new eyes, because the next time they hear a story, you know, it could change their point of view and maybe impact them to vote differently. And I think that's something that as our younger generations and us growing up with our older gen is really helping.
And I think that's why these ballot parties that you're hosting are just so important, and, you know, are such a asset to the community as well. So I hope, you know, community can take advantage of this ballot party that you're having. If you want to go ahead and plug that in real quick, we're about to take another quick little break. But if you want to go ahead and let folks know about the ballot party once again.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, once again, the ballot party is going to be a community collaboration with Initiate Justice Action and several other groups that have voting resources. It's going to be this Saturday, October 19th in North Hollywood Park from 12 to 3 p.m. We will have free food, bounce house for the kids, again, voting resources, and just, you know, community and fun and vibes.
Awesome, guys. And we'll be posting that on our social media. If you guys want to get a hold of us on our social media is Voces Unidas en Pacoima. And you can also get a hold of us on Valley Views SFE Media as well. But you guys are tuned in to Voces Unidas. This show is produced by Valley Views SFE Media and Voces Unidas en Pacoima. You are on KROJ 101.5 FM. These are your hosts, Diosy,
Melisa,
and Teodora.
and we'll be right back, y'all. Up on Melancholy Hill, there's a plastic dream. Anyway, y'all, you guys are tuned into KROJ 101.5 FM. This is Voces Unidas. We are produced by Valley Views SFE Media and Voces Unidas en Pacoima. And like I said, you guys are tuned into KROJ 101.5 FM. Your hosts today are Diosy,
Melisa,
And Teodora.
and, you know, we've been here talking about Initiate Justice Action. And we're really lucky to be joined by Tiana. Thank you again. This is like my 4th time thanking you. But again, this is just such great information that we're able to put out to our community, your community as well. And I wanted to ask, are there any other propositions that community should know about that is related to reform?
Absolutely, and thank you for asking that, because we actually do have a really good ballot proposition that I'm excited to talk about, and that is Proposition 6. So what Prop 6 will do is eliminate involuntary servitude in California state prisons. Folks might be aware with the 13th Amendment at the federal level, which allows which abolishes slavery except for the punishment of a crime. But folks may not know that we have a similar clause in our California state constitution. So in the California state constitution, it also allows involuntary servitude, aka slavery, as the punishment for a crime. And the way that manifests itself inside the state prison system is essentially people can be forced to work. And being forced to work means maybe they're not completing a college class or another rehabilitation program because they're being forced to work in the kitchen for 8 cents an hour. And, if you refuse to work because you want to do something else, then you can be disciplined for that. So you can get a write-up, you can get time added to your sentence, you can lose rights such as visitation and things like that. So essentially folks in our state prison system are being forced to work and being paid slave wages, somewhere between 8 cents and like 39 cents an hour. So what Proposition 6 would do is simply strike that language from the California state constitution, so that folks who are currently incarcerated would have the option to work, which many folks still would, because they do want to, be productive with their time and make an income, even though it is a small amount of money. But another thing that Prop 6 would do, there was another piece of legislation that passed out of Sacramento this year, which stated that if Proposition 6 passes, then CDCR, which is the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, would have to reevaluate the wages that they're paying people. Yeah. So it's not necessarily, a promise that wages will increase or anything like that, but they will have to go back and, look at how much folks are getting paid while they're incarcerated, because right now it's horrible.
Yeah. I always wonder, I think maybe since I've wondered, I should probably have looked into it. But this is great information because I always see the people on the side of the freeways, or, we always see incarcerated folks cleaning up and whatnot. And I think that recently I saw it and I was like, what? Like, I didn't really realize that was still happening.
Yeah, and incarcerated folks are also fighting fires in California, which is a very, very dangerous job. My ex-husband was actually an incarcerated firefighter, and he watched somebody die during training. He tried to, bring him back to life, and this person lost his life. And while they are being trained to fight fires, they're the highest paying job. They get paid $1 an hour. Right. Wow. And while they're actively fighting fires, and, they can be sent away for weeks in some of these really dangerous fires, they're getting paid $2 an hour. And then most of the time when they come home, because of their felony conviction, they can't even get hired as a firefighter. So a lot of times, folks, they take these kinds of jobs that are, they're literally risking their lives because they'll get paid $1 an hour more, than like 8 cents or, 20 cents an hour. So, there's definitely like a lot of injustice in the prison system, and Prop 6 will help us along that way.
And I think this is a great opportunity to show the intersectionalities between climate change and the system that puts already the most vulnerable community. Who knows where our incarcerated folks may come from, right? And there is a higher rate and from disproportionately service communities who do get incarcerated, so they end up fighting multiple battles. On top of being sentenced, they deal with our climate change issues, which big corporations are the ones who are at the biggest fault for. Absolutely. But just wanted to plug that intersectional intersectional need of bringing attention to how we are always constantly fighting more than just one issue at a time.
Yeah, thank you.
There's a climate bond on the ballot too.
Yeah,
that's right. What's on your ballot, y'all?
What's on your ballot?
Well, I know that with there's such an importance with Prop 6, and even other states have also created legislation and passed legislation.
Yes.
And what's the reason why California is doing it now? Do you know if like there is any movement on this like in earlier ballot measures, and kind of what's making this kind of like the historic moment that we have now with this prop?
Yeah, this is something actually that the organizations who have been leading the work on this, which includes, some of our friends like Sister Warriors, Freedom Coalition, and Anti-Recidivism Coalition, who have really done an amazing job of leading this work, ACLU as well. They actually introduced this legislation a few years ago, but the reason that it didn't make it through Sacramento was around the issue of wages. There were certain senators, namely, who said, oh, I don't think that we should pass this to abolish involuntary servitude, because then what if we have to pay incarcerated people minimum wage? They were really scared, and they didn't want to do that. So the co-sponsors of this bill had to bring it back, a little bit watered down, where it didn't have anything specific around, like how much people were going to get paid, which is unfortunate, right? Because everybody deserves to get paid at least minimum wage, because minimum wage is already too low. Specifically if you're, doing things like being an incarcerated firefighter and, risking your life. So folks should have a guaranteed wage. But it was really that issue that held this up as long as it did. And unfortunately, it's still a question for some folks. Some folks are like, hey, maybe I am okay with slavery if they're incarcerated.
Yeah.
Well,
Wow.
can we learn a little bit more about who is the opposition and who is opposing this? For us, the folks who are voting no on Proposition 6, like what is the narrative that they are leaning into?
Well, fortunately, Proposition 6 does not have any organized opposition at this moment. So there's not a ballot committee. Nobody's spending money to try and oppose it or anything like that. So there's no organized opposition, which is good. But in terms of the narrative, and I've heard this, we've participated in some focus groups and some things like that. And some folks do still believe that for a punishment of a crime, there's no punishment that's too strict. So folks are still okay with, certain folks essentially being forced to work. They think it's an appropriate consequence. Yeah. But another thing that I'll say, which is, the elephant in the room, there's obviously a racial aspect to this as well. Because I think in California we say, oh, well, technically we never had slavery in this state. But we do, because we have involuntary servitude on our Constitution. And there is a huge racial disparity. Black folks only make up just under 6% of the California state population, but make up about 28% of the incarcerated population. And, people who are in prison are the only ones who are legally allowed to be enslaved. And, you just back up. If we start with slavery, then we had Jim Crow laws and things like that. So there have always been things on the books where even if slavery is quote unquote abolished, there's still ways of, keeping Black folks in particular, but all marginalized groups, being forced to work one way or the other. And Proposition 6 is one way that we can, just strip away another one of these barriers in our state.
It's actually because it's also Indigenous Peoples Day. I did look up Anti-Recidivism Coalition, and they've made a post. And I would like to read their caption really quickly to acknowledge the work that they're doing as well. And they posted today, on this Indigenous Peoples Day and every day, let's celebrate and uplift our Indigenous friends and families inside and at home. Indigenous people are disproportionately impacted by the prison system and also underanalyzed and underrepresented in conversations around incarceration. And I think that goes to the topic of marginalized communities and indigenous peoples also facing this system that was built against them from the start. Right. And we are in San Fernando, so we have also that very harsh genocide that occurred to the Tautavian band of Mission Indian and the Tongva people beyond, who, don't even, in San Fernando, we don't even have a mission here to recognize that history. A reservation to recognize that history, but we do have a mission that continues to be, protected, which, we get to see that history every day. But it goes back to the topic of marginalized communities always having to fight for their rights and their presence. And
Yeah.
this is a big part of advocacy, is making sure we uplift those voices.
Yeah, thank you guys for that. As we wrap up our show here, I wanted to ask you, Tiana, how can people support the work of Initiate Justice and Initiate Justice Action or any other similar organizations? If there's any other similar organizations that you can plug in as well, how can folks do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the easiest way to reach us is either on our website or on our social media sites. So, again, our website is ijaction.org. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at ijaction. Folks can always donate to support our work, specifically doing like the 501c4 organizing work. It's a little bit more difficult to fundraise for that because we do like partisan and, political organizing. So definitely encourage folks to donate if they can. If not, folks can also become a member. We're a membership-based organization. So we have general meetings on the second Tuesday of every month on Zoom. Everybody is welcome. Our next one's after the election, actually. It's going to be Tuesday, November 12th. So folks can sign up for the general meetings on our website as well. Folks in LA, come to our ballot party in North Hollywood this Saturday, 12 to 3 in North Hollywood Park. But other organizations, who do similar work, one that I named is Sister Warriors Freedom Coalition. They specifically uplift women and trans folks who are impacted by the criminal justice system. Anti-Recidivism Coalition is another really great one. Here in LA, we have La Defensa, who's a woman-led organization where they focus on accountability for judges in LA County. There are a lot of really great organizations who are doing this work.
Thank you so much for that. And, any last words or any words of encouragement or anything that you want to say specifically to our voters?
Absolutely. I know that every election cycle can feel so overwhelming. Like we're all so tired of the commercials, the text messages, the attacks. We're all just so like overloaded with information. And sometimes you don't know who to trust, right? And it's really difficult to like cast your ballot. So I definitely encourage folks to lean into community, to participate in things like our ballot parties, to check out people's, voter guides, and to encourage your friends and family to get involved too. Like, even if you don't come to our ballot party, you can have a ballot party at your house, just invite your loved ones to come by, bring their ballots, talk through some of the issues, because everything that is on this ballot, it's not just the presidential race, like everything down to state, county, city, these ballot propositions, they will have an impact on our everyday lives, on the lives of, children in the future. So I just really hope that folks carry with them like the weight of that responsibility, but also the power, because we have a voice. Unfortunately, not everybody has the opportunity to cast a vote. People in California state prisons and federal prisons are still not able to vote. Yeah. People who are not citizens in the state are not able to vote. So if you have the ability, if you have the privilege and the right, please exercise it. And you have, folks in the community who can help you do that.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
And to our listeners, this was a segment of Voces Unidas, and we have been running a segment called Roots and Resilience. And so this today, we hope that learning a little bit about Measure G, Proposition 6, Proposition 36, we hope that, you guys feel a little bit more empowered. You guys feel, ready, a little more ready. But yeah, just want to let everybody know that you guys are tuned in to Voces Unidas. Our next show is going to be October 20th, which will be on a Sunday. Our special guest for that show will be Sean Rivas. So super excited for that. He's a good, I would call him a friend. He's a great supporter. Love running into him in community. And so super excited to have him here in the studio. We will also be on air October 28th, which is a Monday. And Las Comadres will be back on air October 21st, which is next Monday. So guys, once again, this was Voces Unidas with your host Diosy,
Melisa,
And Teodora.
This show is produced by Valley Views SFE Media and Voces Unidas in Pacoima. Special thank you to our sponsors, Superior Carco, Prime One Design, and who am I missing? Superior Carco, Prime One Design, and Maria's Tamales. And want to give a special shout out to Pueblo y Salud. I want to thank our guest for today's show, Tiana from Initiate Justice. So yeah, guys, thank you guys. We'll catch you guys next time.